I stared at my screen in disbelief as the company-wide email from Jackson appeared. Subject: Leadership changes effective immediately. My name was at the top of the list. Cleaning house to prepare for our next growth phase, he wrote. Tears stung my eyes as 5 years of building NeuroSync from nothing crashed down around me. Through the glass walls, I could see my team already whispering. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor, the lead investor's lawyer. Do not clean out your desk. The shareholders' agreement has a clause they forgot. Meet me in 20 minutes. I never expected to become a company founder. 5 years ago, I was just Lucy Matthews, a software engineer with a passion for neural interfaces and too many student loans. My college friend Thomas Walker had been the one with entrepreneurial dreams, always talking about building something revolutionary while we pulled all-nighters in the computer science lab. But I was the one who actually built the prototype that would become NeuroSync's core technology during a weekend hackathon. This is it, Lucy, Thomas had said when I showed him my crude but functioning algorithm that predicted user inputs before they completed them. This is our ticket out of the corporate grind. His enthusiasm was infectious, and within a month, we were working from his garage, living on ramen noodles and coffee, coding until our eyes burned. Those early days were magical. Just the two of us, a whiteboard, and endless possibilities. Thomas handled the business side while I built our technology from scratch, often working 20 hours straight when inspiration struck. We complemented each other perfectly. He could charm investors with vision and strategy. I could translate that vision into functioning code that made people's eyes widen with wonder during demos. Our first real office was a converted storage room above a print shop. We hired 2 junior developers, then 5 more. By our second year, we had 20 employees and our first round of serious venture funding. The day Capital Venture led our Series A round for $8 million, Thomas popped champagne in our new office space. To Lucy, he had toasted, raising his plastic cup. The technical genius who makes the impossible look easy. None of this exists without you. The growth that followed was dizzying. 40 employees became 80, then 150. Our valuation climbed to $85 million. We expanded to a full floor in a downtown high-rise with glass-walled conference rooms and a fully stocked kitchen. Industry publications called us the next unicorn in human-computer interaction. Through it all, I remained focused on our technology, constantly improving our algorithms, leading the engineering team with a hands-on approach that earned their loyalty and respect. The first hint of trouble came 3 years in, when Thomas suggested bringing his son Jackson into the company. Fresh out of business school with an MBA from Stanford, Jackson was all polished surfaces and buzzwords. He needs real-world experience, Thomas explained when I expressed hesitation. And keeping it in the family means someone I trust will be helping shoulder the business responsibilities. I reluctantly agreed, even though something about Jackson's calculating gaze made me uneasy. He started as Director of Strategic Initiatives, a vague title that gave him access to every department. Within months, he had formed alliances with our newer board members, particularly those from the venture capital firms who had joined after our Series A. The company culture began to shift subtly. Decisions that Thomas and I used to make together now happened in meetings I wasn't invited to. The sales team grew dramatically under Jackson's direction, often making promises our technology couldn't yet fulfill, creating tension between departments that had never existed before. I found myself increasingly isolated, retreating into the technical challenges of our upcoming version 3.0 release, a complete platform overhaul that would cement our market leadership. My team remained loyal, but in executive meetings, I could feel my influence waning. As Jackson introduced new metrics focused solely on growth and customer acquisition, with little regard for technical excellence or sustainability. Despite the tension, I remained dedicated to completing our groundbreaking 3.0 release. This wasn't just another update, but a fundamental reimagining of our entire platform, incorporating 3 years of user data and research. While the politics swirled around me, I found refuge in the purity of the code, leading my team through complex technical challenges with the same passion that had built the company. The night we secured $40 million in Series B funding should have been a triumph. The party at Thomas's lakeside home was lavish, with investors and employees celebrating what everyone called the next chapter of our success story. I smiled for the photos, but couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming a footnote in the narrative of the company I had helped create. As the party wound down, Thomas asked me to join him on the dock overlooking the water. The spring air was cool, and he looked older than his 53 years in the moonlight. "I need to tell you something, Lucy," he said quietly, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "I've been diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. The doctors are optimistic, but the treatment is going to be rough." My heart sank as he continued. "That's partly why I've been giving Jackson more responsibilities. I need him to learn the business inside and out, in case." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. "Thomas, I'm so sorry," I said, gripping his arm. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? You've been so focused on the 3.0 release, and it's so important for our future," he explained. "I didn't want to distract you. Jackson's eager to prove himself, and this is his chance. I'm asking you to try to work with him, for my sake." I nodded, stunned by both the news and the realization that Thomas had been keeping this from me while confiding in his son. As I drove home that night, I resolved to make the best of the situation, for Thomas's sake, and for the company we had built together. Little did I know that Jackson had plans that would upend everything we had worked for. 6 weeks after the funding celebration, I was working late with my team, fixing critical bugs before a demonstration for a potential client that could double our user base. The office had emptied out except for the 7 engineers hunched over their keyboards, fueled by pizza and determination to make our platform flawless. "We're almost there," I encouraged them, reviewing the latest diagnostics. "The latency issue is nearly solved. This client could be a game changer for us." At precisely 9:32 p.m., our concentration was broken by the simultaneous ping of incoming emails. I glanced at my phone and saw the subject line from Jackson Walker: "Leadership changes effective immediately." Opening the email, I felt the blood drain from my face. The first paragraph read, "Team Neurosync. As we prepare for our next phase of hypergrowth following our successful Series B, we are making strategic leadership changes effective immediately. Lucy Matthews will be stepping down from her role as Chief Technical Officer and leaving the company." The next paragraph was worse. "This difficult decision is part of our necessary process of cleaning house to prepare for our next growth phase. We thank Lucy for her contributions to the company's early stages and wish her well in future endeavors." I looked up from my phone to find my team staring at me in shock. Through the glass walls of our workspace, I could see other employees who had been working late appearing in doorways, their eyes finding me with expressions ranging from surprise to pity. "Lucy, is this for real?" asked Sam, my lead developer. "They can't just fire you. You built everything." Before I could answer, the elevator doors opened, and Jackson strode in, flanked by 2 men I recognized from the security team. He wore a dark suit despite the late hour, his expression a mask of corporate solemnity that didn't quite hide the triumph in his eyes. "Lucy," he said with practiced regret, "I'm sure you've seen the announcement. We have security here to help facilitate your departure." "You announced my termination in a company-wide email before telling me to my face?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and humiliation. "It was a timing issue," he replied smoothly. "We needed to ensure clear communication across all channels simultaneously. Your company email and access credentials have already been deactivated for security purposes." I tried to log into my computer and found he was right. 5 years of my work and I was locked out in seconds. "My personal items," I began. "Already packed," Jackson gestured to 2 cardboard boxes by the door. "We've been thorough." The violation of having strangers pack my belongings without my knowledge or consent was overwhelming. Photos of my family, notes from my team after successful launches, even the small cactus Sam had given me last Christmas had been unceremoniously thrown into boxes. My team watched in stunned silence as the security personnel stepped forward. The older guard, Dave, who had greeted me every morning for 3 years, couldn't meet my eyes. "This isn't necessary," I said, fighting to maintain my composure. "I can walk out on my own." "Company protocol for executive transitions," Jackson insisted. "The board has approved all of this." I doubted Thomas would have approved this public humiliation, but challenging Jackson would only make this mortifying scene worse for everyone, especially my team who were watching with evident distress. Let me at least say goodbye to my team, I requested. Jackson checked his watch impatiently. Make it quick. I turned to my engineers, who had gathered protectively around me. Keep pushing the boundaries, I told them quietly. Don't let the vision get lost in the metrics. Several nodded, eyes suspiciously bright. Sam stepped forward. This isn't right, Lucy. We'll go with you. No, I said firmly. The 3.0 release needs you, all of you. Finish what we started. Collecting what dignity I could, I picked up one box while Dave reluctantly took the other. As I walked through the office I had helped design, past the workspaces of people I had hired and mentored, the silence was deafening. A few brave souls nodded or touched my arm as I passed, but most averted their eyes, whether from respect for my privacy or fear for their own positions. I couldn't tell. In the elevator, Dave murmured, I'm sorry, Miss Matthews. This isn't how things should be done. I nodded, beyond words. The doors opened to the lobby, and as I stepped out toward the night and an uncertain future, my phone rang. The number wasn't one I recognized. Lucy Matthews speaking. I answered automatically. Miss Matthews, this is Eleanor Jenkins, legal counsel for Capital Venture, came a crisp, authoritative voice. I represent the lead investor in Neurosync. I've just been informed of your termination and would like to meet with you immediately. I literally just got escorted out of the building, I said, struggling to balance my phone and the box of personal items. I'm aware, and I believe there may have been a significant oversight in the process, Eleanor replied. There's a diner called Blue Moon 3 blocks east of your office. Can you meet me there in 20 minutes? Something in her tone sparked a flicker of hope in the darkness. I'll be there, I promised. As I loaded my boxes into my car, I saw Jackson watching from the lobby. Even through the glass doors, I could see the smug satisfaction on his face. Whatever Eleanor Jenkins wanted to discuss, I suddenly very much wanted to hear it. The Blue Moon Diner was nearly empty at 10:30 p.m., just a few night shift workers nursing coffees and a couple in a corner booth speaking in hushed tones. The retro chrome and blue decor would normally have charmed me, but tonight everything felt surreal, as if I were moving through someone else's life. A slender woman with silver-streaked dark hair waved from a booth in the back. I recognized Eleanor Jenkins from board meetings, though we'd never spoken directly. As lead counsel for Capital Venture, she typically observed rather than participated, taking notes and occasionally whispering to Carl Winters, the partner who held Neurosync's board seat. Thank you for coming, Miss Matthews, she said as I slid into the booth across from her. A manila folder and legal pad sat neatly beside her coffee cup. Call me Lucy, I said automatically. And thank you for reaching out, though I'm not sure what good it will do. I've been publicly fired and escorted out by security. The waitress appeared, and I ordered coffee, suddenly aware that I hadn't eaten since noon. Add a slice of apple pie, Eleanor suggested. Trust me, you'll need the energy for what comes next. Once the waitress left, Eleanor opened the folder and removed a thick document I recognized as the amended shareholders agreement created when Capital Venture led our series around. Are you familiar with Section 27, subsection C of this agreement? She asked. I shook my head. Thomas handled most of the legal aspects. I reviewed the technical specifications and commitments, but not much else. Eleanor turned the document toward me, pointing to a highlighted paragraph. This section stipulates specific protections for founding members. In particular, subsection C states that the founding technical officer shall not be removed from their position without unanimous approval from the board of directors. I read the clause twice, trying to comprehend its implications through my emotional fog. What exactly does this mean for me right now? It means, Eleanor said, her expression serious but with a hint of satisfaction, that Jackson Walker cannot legally terminate you without a unanimous vote from the entire board. Our sources indicate no such vote has taken place. Hope sparked in my chest. Thomas would never vote to remove me like this. Precisely. And neither would Carl Winters, Capital Venture's representative. Eleanor tapped the document. We take founder protections very seriously. They're not just boilerplate language to us. Why would you care about protecting me? I asked, genuinely curious. Eleanor looked at me appraisingly. Lucy, Capital Venture invested $8 million initially, and another $12 million in the Series B, based largely on two factors: the revolutionary technology you developed and the technical leadership you provide. Jackson Walker has neither. The waitress brought my coffee and pie. I took a bite automatically, the sweetness barely registering. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Jackson has called an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow to ratify leadership changes, according to the calendar invitation that came through an hour ago. I suspect he believed he could present your termination as a fait accompli and push through board approval retroactively." Eleanor's smile was thin and sharp. "We'll be attending that meeting together to contest the termination based on this clause." "I'll be there," I said, feeling a spark of determination cutting through my shock. "But there's something I don't understand. Why would this clause exist in the first place? It's so specific." Eleanor closed the folder. "Because Thomas Walker insisted on it. When we were negotiating the Series A terms, he was adamant about protecting your position. He said, and I quote, 'Lucy is the technical heart of this company. Without her, there is no Neurosync.'" Tears threatened again, but this time from a complex mixture of gratitude toward Thomas and betrayal that he had apparently allowed his son to undermine me despite this protection. "Thomas has been undergoing cancer treatment," I said quietly. "He told me at the Series B celebration. Jackson may have taken advantage of his father's vulnerability." Eleanor nodded, making a note. "That adds context. Tonight, I need you to gather evidence of your technical contributions to the company, particularly recent ones. Bring documentation of any projects, innovations, or team leadership that demonstrates your ongoing value." "Most of my files are on company servers I can no longer access," I pointed out. "Focus on what you have in personal backups or cloud storage, anything that shows your critical role in the company's success, especially the version 3.0 release Jackson mentioned in his email." I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. "I have local backups of most key architectures, plus emails and presentation decks." "Good. Meet me in the lobby at 8:30 tomorrow. Dress professionally and be prepared for a fight. Jackson won't back down easily." As I drove home, my apartment felt strange and empty, as if I had been gone for months rather than hours. I plugged in my laptop and began searching through my personal cloud storage for evidence of my contributions to Neurosync. Around 2 a.m., as I was organizing files for the board presentation, I noticed a folder I didn't immediately recognize. Opening it revealed dozens of documents automatically synced from my work computer through our cloud backup system. Most were standard technical specifications, but one subfolder caught my eye: Altacore discussions. Altacore was our main competitor, a company that had taken a different technical approach to neural interface technology but targeted the same market. Opening the folder, I found meeting notes, presentation decks, and email threads between Jackson and Altacore executives dating back 3 months. My hands trembled as I read an email from Jackson to Altacore's CEO. "Once the organizational changes are complete and I have full technical control, we can move forward with the integration plan. The core IP transfer can begin as soon as the technical leadership transition is finalized." He was planning to sell our technology. My technology. Another document detailed a personal compensation package for Jackson in exchange for facilitating Altacore's acquisition of Neurosync at a fraction of its market value. The amount would make him wealthy, while leaving other shareholders with pennies on the dollar. I sat back, mind racing. Jackson hadn't just wanted my job, he needed me gone to execute this betrayal. With me out of the way, there would be no one with enough technical knowledge to question how he handled the intellectual property during a transition. Checking the clock, I saw it was nearly 3 a.m. The board meeting was just 6 hours away. I began copying the incriminating files to a separate folder, organizing them alongside my technical contributions. By dawn, I had a comprehensive presentation ready not only to defend my position, but to expose Jackson's true motives. As the sun rose over the city, I showered and dressed in my most professional outfit, a navy suit I reserved for investor presentations. For the first time since seeing that company-wide email, I felt something beyond shock and hurt. I felt resolve. This wasn't just about saving my job anymore. It was about saving the company Thomas and I had built from the ground up. At precisely 8:30 a.m., I walked into the familiar lobby of our office building. Eleanor was already waiting, immaculate in a charcoal suit, her briefcase and a tablet at her side. "Ready?" she asked, assessing my appearance with approval. "As I'll ever be," I replied, gripping my laptop bag a little tighter. We rode the elevator in silence. My stomach churned with anxiety, but beneath it ran a current of determination. I had spent 5 years pouring my heart, mind, and soul into Neurosync. I wouldn't let it be destroyed by Jackson's greed. The elevator doors opened, and I braced myself for the awkwardness of facing colleagues after yesterday's public dismissal. The receptionist's eyes widened at the sight of me, her mouth forming a small O of surprise. "Good morning, Amber," I said with as much normalcy as I could muster. "We're here for the board meeting." Before she could respond, Jackson emerged from the main hallway, already deep in conversation with 2 board members. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me, his practiced corporate mask slipping to reveal naked shock. "Lucy," he said, recovering quickly, "this is a closed board meeting. Security will need to escort you out again." "Actually," Eleanor stepped forward, extending her business card. "I'm Eleanor Jenkins, Capital Ventures Legal Counsel, Miss. Matthews is here as the company's founding technical officer, protected under Section 27, subsection C of the shareholders' agreement, which requires unanimous board approval for her removal. No such vote has occurred." Jackson's face flushed, but he maintained his composure. "This is merely a formality. The decision has executive approval and will be ratified today." "Then you won't mind if we participate in that ratification discussion," Eleanor replied smoothly. "Shall we?" Without waiting for his response, she guided me toward the boardroom, leaving Jackson little choice but to follow. Inside, 5 of the 7 board members were already seated around the gleaming table. Carl Winters from Capital Venture nodded to Eleanor. The others regarded me with varying degrees of surprise and discomfort. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded Gregory Pierce, a Series B investor who had always aligned with Jackson. "Miss Matthews is no longer with the company." "That's precisely what we're here to discuss," Eleanor replied, taking a seat and gesturing for me to do the same. "Miss Matthews's termination was executed without proper board approval, in direct violation of the shareholders' agreement." Jackson took his place at the head of the table, where Thomas usually Saturday. "We can discuss the procedural concerns, but let's be clear that this decision was made for the company's strategic benefit. Lucy's focus on technical perfectionism has delayed our market expansion. We need leadership aligned with our growth objectives." The next 30 minutes unfolded like a choreographed dance of corporate politics. Jackson presented a case against me built on distortions and selective facts, delayed release schedules, which had been caused by his own team's constantly changing requirements, resistance to new market opportunities, actually my insistence on not overpromising capabilities, and an inability to scale technical operations, despite my team growing from 2 to 65 engineers under my leadership. Throughout his presentation, I maintained a neutral expression, though each mischaracterization stung. Eleanor occasionally made notes, but otherwise remained silent, following our agreed strategy to let Jackson fully present his case before responding. When he finally finished, Eleanor spoke up. "Before the board considers this matter further, Miss Matthews would like to address these points and provide additional context regarding her contributions to Neurosync." Jackson frowned. "We don't typically allow terminated employees to make presentations to the board. As established, Miss Matthews's termination was procedurally invalid," Eleanor countered. "And as a founding officer and significant shareholder, she has every right to address this board." Carl Winters, Capital Ventures representative, spoke for the first time. "I think we should hear what Lucy has to say. After all, she built the technology that brought us all to this table." Jackson had no choice but to yield the floor. I connected my laptop to the presentation system and stood, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. 5 years ago, Thomas Walker and I founded Neurosync with a vision to create neural interface technology that would change how humans interact with computers, I began. "Today, I'd like to show you exactly what my team and I have built, where we stand with version 3.0, and why technical leadership continuity is critical at this juncture." For the next 20 minutes, I walked through the evolution of our technology, the innovations my team had created under my direction, and the groundbreaking features of the upcoming release. I included emails from major clients specifically praising the technical excellence that differentiated us from competitors like Alticore. I showed metrics on employee retention within the engineering department, significantly higher than industry averages, and the acceleration of our development velocity over the past 2 quarters. Yesterday, I was accused of delaying progress, I said, approaching my conclusion. In reality, my team is 3 weeks ahead of schedule on version 3.0, despite scope increases from marketing. These are the facts, documented and verifiable. The board members were engaged, asking technical questions that demonstrated genuine interest. Even Gregory Pierce seemed to be reassessing his position. Jackson sat rigid in his chair, his expression darkening as he lost control of the narrative. While I appreciate this history lesson, Jackson interrupted as I concluded the technical portion. It doesn't address the forward-looking leadership needed for our next growth phase. The decision stands. I believe there's one more critical factor the board should consider, I said, changing to the final section of my presentation. During my preparation for this meeting, I discovered concerning documents regarding negotiations between Jackson Walker and Alticore, our direct competitor. Jackson's face went pale. That's proprietary information you have no right to access after termination. These files were automatically synced to my personal cloud storage while I was still CTO, I explained, displaying the first email exchange. They reveal a plan to sell NeuroSync's core intellectual property to Alticore following a leadership change. The boardroom erupted in exclamations and questions. I methodically walked through the documents, showing Jackson's communications with Alticore executives and the personal compensation package he had negotiated for facilitating the deal. This is absurd, Jackson sputtered when I finished. These are exploratory conversations about potential partnerships, taken out of context. A $50 million personal payout isn't a partnership exploration, Carl Winters said coldly, examining the documents Eleanor had distributed. It's a betrayal of fiduciary duty. The momentum had shifted dramatically. Board members who had entered ready to support Jackson now regarded him with suspicion. Legal concerns about breach of duty were raised. Questions about Thomas's knowledge of these discussions emerged. Thomas Walker would never approve selling the company's technology in this manner, I stated firmly. He's been undergoing cancer treatment and may not be fully aware of these activities. This meeting needs to be recessed, Gregory Pierce announced, standing abruptly. We need to consult independent counsel about these allegations and review these documents thoroughly. Jackson attempted to regain control, but the board agreed to a 1-hour recess. As people filed out, many avoiding eye contact with Jackson, I felt a wave of exhaustion. The adrenaline that had carried me through the presentation was ebbing, leaving behind the emotional toll of the past 24 hours. Eleanor squeezed my arm encouragingly. You did brilliantly. This is far from over, but you've completely changed the dynamics. As the boardroom emptied, I gathered my materials, planning to find a quiet corner to decompress during the recess. Just as I was about to leave, the door opened again, and Thomas Walker entered slowly, looking frail in a way that shocked me. The treatment had taken a visible toll. He had lost weight, and his normally robust presence seemed diminished. "Lucy," he said, his voice weaker than I remembered, but his eyes sharp and focused. "We need to talk privately." Thomas and I found an empty conference room down the hall. Through the glass walls, I could see small groups of board members in intense discussion, occasionally glancing our way. Jackson was nowhere to be seen. Thomas lowered himself carefully into a chair, moving like a man decades older than his actual age. The chemotherapy had clearly ravaged his body, but his eyes still held the intelligence and determination I had always respected. "I owe you an apology," he began without preamble. "A profound one." I sat across from him, emotion rising in my throat. "Thomas, what happened? Did you know about the email? The public firing?" He shook his head, genuine horror in his expression. "No. God, no, Lucy. I knew Jackson wanted leadership changes, but not like this. Never like this." "Then why wasn't I protected?" "You apparently fought for that clause in the shareholders' agreement specifically to prevent this." Thomas rubbed his hand over his face, a gesture of exhaustion and regret I'd seen countless times during our startup days. "Jackson came to me last week with concerns about the company's direction. He said you'd been talking about leaving after the 3.0 release, that you felt your vision for the company no longer aligned with the investors. He showed me emails where you'd supposedly discussed frustrations with the company's path. What emails? I asked, stunned. I never said anything about leaving. I see that now, Thomas said grimly. After hearing you just now, seeing how passionate you still are about NeuroSync, I'm certain those communications were fabricated or manipulated. But at the time, weakened by the treatments and trusting my son, his voice broke slightly. I told him any transition needed to be handled respectfully, with proper recognition of your contributions and a generous exit package. I agreed to support a structured succession plan over months, not. He gestured helplessly. Not a midnight coup and public humiliation. The depth of Jackson's manipulation stunned me. He had exploited his father's illness and trust to engineer my removal, knowing Thomas was the one person who would never agree to it under normal circumstances. Thomas, there's more, I said gently. Jackson has been meeting with Alticore. He's planning to sell them our core technology after taking control. I showed him the documents on my laptop. With each slide, Thomas's expression moved from disbelief to shock to a deep, devastating anger. When I reached the personal compensation agreement, he closed his eyes briefly, as if the sight physically pained him. My own son, he whispered, planning to sell out everyone who believed in us, including you, including me. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the magnitude of the betrayal. I never should have brought him into the company, Thomas said finally. I wanted to believe he shared our values, that he could carry forward what we built if my health. He didn't finish the thought. You couldn't have known, I said, surprising myself with the impulse to comfort him despite my own hurt. I should have, he countered. There were signs. His focus on quick returns rather than sustainable growth, his dismissiveness toward the technical team. I ignored them because I wanted to believe the best of him. Thomas straightened in his chair with visible effort. When the meeting resumes, I'll be there. As chairman, I still hold significant voting power. Jackson won't be able to claim he has my proxy anymore. Are you sure you're strong enough? I asked, concerned by his pallor. For this? I have to be. Determination hardened his features, reminding me of the Thomas I had founded a company with. Lucy, regardless of what happens with Jackson, I want you to know something. You are the best business partner I could have asked for. Your integrity and brilliance built NeuroSync as much as my business plans, more even. I let you down, and I'm deeply sorry. The sincerity in his voice moved me. Despite everything, our 5-year partnership and friendship still meant something. We need a plan for when the meeting resumes, I said, refocusing on the immediate challenge. Jackson won't back down easily, especially now that his Alticore plans are exposed. Thomas nodded. I'll speak first as chairman. Clarify that I never authorized your termination in this manner. Then you should present the technical documentation, showing your essential role in the version 3.0 release. And the Alticore evidence? We'll present it together, Thomas decided. Coming from both founders, it will carry more weight. I spent the remaining recess time organizing our joint presentation and helping Thomas review the key documents. Despite his weakened state, his mind remained sharp, quickly grasping the technical implications of what Jackson had planned to sell to our competitor. As we worked, I received an email notification from an anonymous sender. The subject line read simply, More evidence re. Jackson Walker and Alticore. Cautiously, I opened it to find audio files and a brief message. Recorded at Alticore headquarters last week. Thought the board should hear directly from Jackson. I played the first recording with Thomas listening beside me. Jackson's voice came through clearly. Once I have control of the technical division, we can move on the IP transfer. The board won't understand enough about the technology to know what's happening until it's done. Another recording had Jackson discussing Thomas. My father's too weak to run the company anymore. The cancer treatments have him sleeping 12 hours a day. By the time he realizes what's happened, the deal will be done. Thomas's face hardened with each word. Send these to Eleanor immediately, he instructed, and forward them to my personal email as well. The conference room phone rang, startling us both. It was Eleanor, informing us the board would reconvene in 5 minutes. As Thomas stood to leave, I caught his arm. "Are you absolutely sure you're up for this?" I asked again. He straightened his tie with dignity. "Lucy, some battles you fight no matter how weak you are. This company is my legacy. But more importantly, it's built on your work and the trust of everyone who believed in us. I won't let my son destroy that." Together, we walked back to the boardroom, united again for perhaps the most important presentation of our partnership. The boardroom had transformed during the recess. The initial tension had given way to something heavier, more consequential. Board members who had entered that morning ready to rubber stamp a routine personnel change now sat with grave expressions, legal pads filled with notes before them. 2 additional lawyers had joined, presumably the independent counsel Gregory Pierce had suggested. Jackson stood at the head of the table, engaged in intense whispered conversation with his ally Stephanie Wong from Taylor Investments. He faltered mid-sentence when he saw Thomas enter beside me. "Dad," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "You shouldn't be here. Your doctors said to avoid stress." "Some situations require personal attention, Jackson," Thomas replied, his voice quiet but carrying authority that silenced the room. "I believe we have serious matters to discuss." Carl Winters stood. "As this is an extraordinary situation, I move that Thomas Walker resume his role as chairman for this meeting, given the serious nature of the allegations that have emerged." Gregory Pierce seconded the motion, and despite Jackson's objection, the vote passed unanimously. Thomas took his seat at the head of the table, the physical toll of his illness evident in how carefully he lowered himself into the chair, but his presence immediately shifted the power dynamic in the room. "This board meeting will resume," Thomas announced formally. "Before we continue with the agenda, I must clarify a critical point. At no time did I authorize the termination of Lucy Matthews in the manner it was executed. Any suggestion that I supported this action is false." Jackson interjected quickly. "We discussed leadership transitions multiple times, Dad. You agreed changes were needed." "I agreed to a respectful, planned transition if Lucy chose to leave," Thomas corrected firmly, "not to a midnight ambush and public humiliation of our co-founder. And certainly not without a formal board vote as required by our shareholders' agreement." Eleanor distributed copies of the relevant section of the agreement to each board member. "As you can see, Section 27, subsection C, explicitly protects the founding technical officer. This clause was insisted upon by Mr. Walker during our Series A negotiations, precisely to prevent this type of situation." "Procedural issues aside," Jackson countered, recovering his composure, "the fundamental question remains whether Miss Matthews' leadership aligns with our growth objectives. The technical division needs fresh direction." "Before we address that claim," I said, standing to reconnect my laptop to the presentation system, "Thomas and I would like to present additional information that bears directly on the company's future and the motivation behind yesterday's events." For the next 30 minutes, Thomas and I presented a unified case that left the board increasingly disturbed. We detailed my critical role in the version 3.0 release, scheduled to launch in just 6 weeks. Thomas emphasized how the technology roadmap I had established positioned the company for sustainable competitive advantage. Then we turned to the Alticore evidence. Thomas, despite his weakened state, delivered this portion with damning precision, his business experience allowing him to highlight the financial implications of what Jackson had planned. "In essence," Thomas concluded, "this was not a termination based on performance or strategic alignment. The evidence suggests it was a calculated first step towards selling our proprietary technology to our largest competitor for personal gain, without board knowledge or shareholder approval." Jackson had grown increasingly agitated during our presentation. When we played the first audio recording of his conversation with Alticore executives, he jumped to his feet. "This is a setup," he shouted. "These recordings are taken out of context. I was conducting authorized competitive intelligence." "Was dismissing me as too weak because of my cancer treatments also competitive intelligence?" Thomas asked quietly, playing the second recording where Jackson discussed his father's condition. The room fell silent at the naked contempt in Jackson's recorded voice. Gregory Pierce spoke first. "Mr. Walker, Jackson, did you authorize these discussions with Alticore regarding technology transfer?" Jackson's response was a masterclass in corporate deflection. All major technology companies explore partnership opportunities. These were preliminary discussions about potential collaboration, nothing more. That doesn't explain the $50 million personal compensation package, Carl Winters noted, tapping the document before him. Or why these discussions weren't disclosed to the board, added Stephanie Wong, her earlier support for Jackson visibly wavering. Jackson's desperation became increasingly evident as board members pressed for straight answers he couldn't provide. His carefully constructed narrative was collapsing around him. The timing of Lucy's termination is particularly troubling, Thomas said, coming just 6 weeks before the version 3.0 release, when she alone fully understands the architecture. That's not true, Jackson insisted. Her team can handle the release. We don't need her. I saw an opening. If my team can handle it without me, why did you tell Alticore that you needed to control the technical division before proceeding with the IP transfer? Jackson's face flushed. You're deliberately misrepresenting that conversation. Then explain what you meant, challenged Carl Winters. Backed into a corner, Jackson made a fatal mistake. The 3.0 release is the perfect cover for transition, he blurted out, then immediately seemed to realize his error. Cover for what transition? Gregory Pierce pressed. Jackson's composure finally cracked. Look, the 3.0 release is Lucy's baby. Once it launches successfully, I could take credit for delivering it after removing her. It would cement my technical leadership credibility with the team and the market. The timing was perfect. The room went silent as the implications of his admission sank in. Jackson had just confessed to planning to claim credit for my team's work after firing me. And the Alticore discussions? Thomas asked quietly. Jackson seemed to realize he had nothing left to lose. Alticore has distribution channels we could never build independently. Their offer was attractive. To you personally or to the shareholders? Eleanor asked pointedly. The market doesn't reward idealists, Jackson snapped. This company needs leadership that understands business reality, not engineers obsessed with perfect code that delays our market expansion. Thomas looked at his son with profound disappointment. Neurosync exists because of those engineers and their obsession with excellence. That's what our clients pay for, what our investors believed in. The board called for a vote on my termination. One by one, each member voted against Jackson's action, declaring it invalid under the shareholders' agreement. Even Stephanie Wong, his remaining ally, abstained rather than supporting him. The board unanimously rejects the termination of Lucy Matthews as Chief Technical Officer, Thomas announced formally. She will be immediately reinstated with full access and authority. This is a mistake, Jackson declared, gathering his papers. The company needs my vision. That brings us to the second matter, Thomas continued calmly. Given the evidence presented regarding unauthorized discussions with a competitor and apparent attempts to misappropriate company intellectual property, I move that Jackson Walker be suspended from all duties pending a full investigation. The vote was again unanimous. Jackson stared in disbelief as his carefully constructed plans disintegrated in real time. You can't do this, he said, looking at his father. I'm your son. Yes, Thomas replied, his voice heavy with regret, which makes this betrayal all the more painful. As security was called to escort Jackson from the premises, an ironic mirror of my experience just one day earlier, he made one final, desperate attempt to salvage his position. Dad, you're not thinking clearly because of the treatments. You need me to run this company when you can't anymore. Thomas looked at him steadily. What I need, Jackson, is what I've always had in Lucy, a partner who shares the vision we founded this company on, who builds rather than exploits, who understands that true leadership isn't about personal gain, but about creating something valuable together. As Jackson was let out, the weight of the past 24 hours hit me all at once. I had gone from founding technical officer to fired to reinstated in a dizzying emotional roller coaster. Looking around the boardroom at the shell-shocked directors, I realized we had won the battle, but faced significant challenges ahead. Given these extraordinary events, Thomas said, addressing the remaining board members, I believe we need to discuss interim leadership arrangements. My health prevents me from maintaining day-to-day operational responsibilities. He turned to me, a question in his eyes that took me by surprise. After everything that had happened, after nearly losing the company I had helped build, Was I ready to step into an even larger role to protect it? The board meeting continued for another 3 hours after Jackson's departure. With Thomas's health concerns now fully disclosed, succession planning took center stage. The discussion was frank but surprisingly unified. The day's events had reminded everyone of NeuroSync's technical foundation and the importance of leadership aligned with our core values. I'd like to propose Lucy Matthews as Interim Chief Executive Officer, while maintaining her role as Chief Technical Officer until the version 3.0 release is complete, Thomas suggested, looking around the table. No one understands both our technology and our company culture better. Carl Winters from Capital Venture nodded approvingly. From an investor perspective, this makes perfect sense. The market needs stability and continuity right now, not another leadership shock. I sat in stunned silence. 24 hours earlier, I had been escorted from the building. Now I was being offered the top leadership position. I appreciate the confidence, I said carefully, but my priority has always been our technology. I'm not sure I'm the right person for both roles. Thomas smiled slightly. That hesitation is precisely why you are the right person, Lucy. You've never sought power for its own sake. After thorough discussion, the board voted unanimously to appoint me interim CEO for a 6-month period, with Thomas remaining as chairman but stepping back from operations to focus on his health. We would revisit permanent leadership arrangements after the version 3.0 release and Thomas's completion of treatment. As the meeting concluded, Gregory Pierce, who had started the day as Jackson's ally, approached me. I misjudged you, Miss Matthews, and I apologize for that. Your presentation today showed not just technical brilliance, but leadership quality we desperately need. The next few weeks were among the most challenging and rewarding of my career. My first official act as interim CEO was addressing the company at an all-hands meeting, where I explained the leadership changes and recommitted to our founding vision of technical excellence paired with ethical business practices. We've been through an organizational earthquake, I told the assembled employees, but our foundation remains solid. Version 3.0 launches in 6 weeks. Let's show the world what NeuroSync is really about. The engineering team welcomed me back with emotional relief. Sam, my lead developer, admitted they had been planning a mass resignation if my termination stood. We're here because of the technical challenges you let us tackle, he explained. That doesn't exist without your leadership. The sales and marketing teams were more cautious, having aligned with Jackson's growth at all costs approach. I spent time with each department, listening to their concerns, and finding middle ground between technical integrity and market responsiveness. Gradually, the cultural divide Jackson had fostered began to heal. The legal aftermath of Jackson's actions was messy but necessary. Our investigation revealed he had copied proprietary code and specifications to external drives, presumably for transfer to Altacore. With Eleanor's guidance, we secured a restraining order preventing him from sharing our intellectual property and initiated proceedings to recover his shares under the bad actor provisions in our bylaws. Throughout this period, I visited Thomas regularly as he continued his treatment. His health improved gradually, and with each visit, I updated him on the company's progress and sought his counsel on difficult decisions. Our partnership evolved into something new but equally valuable. His experience balancing my technical focus as we rebuilt what his son had nearly destroyed. The version 3.0 release launched on schedule to enthusiastic market response. The neural prediction capabilities my team had labored over for months proved even more revolutionary than we had hoped, increasing user efficiency by 40% and opening entirely new application domains. Our platform wasn't just a product anymore. It was becoming the foundation for a new way of human-computer interaction. At the 3-month mark of my interim leadership, our key metrics told a compelling story. Engineering productivity up 35%, employee retention improved across all departments, and most importantly, customer satisfaction scores at their highest levels ever. The board extended my interim CEO role to a full year, with Thomas's full support. You've done something remarkable, Lucy, he told me during a strategy lunch 6 months after that fateful board meeting. His color had returned, and his doctors were cautiously optimistic about his prognosis. You've proven that technical excellence and business success aren't opposing forces, They're complementary when leadership understands both. We implemented structural changes to protect the company from similar threats in the future. The shareholders' agreement was amended to strengthen founder protections and add ethical conduct requirements for all executives. We created a technical oversight committee to ensure business decisions wouldn't compromise our core innovation principles. And most symbolically, we moved the engineering department from the back of the office to the central area, physically representing their essential role in our company's identity. 1 year after my termination and dramatic reinstatement, Neurosync had transformed. Our valuation had increased to $120 million. Version 3.5 was in development, building on the success of our previous release. Thomas had completed his treatment and returned to an active role as chairman, though he chose not to resume day-to-day operations. At the anniversary board meeting, Thomas made a surprise announcement. I move that we remove the interim designation and formally appoint Lucy Matthews as Chief Executive Officer of Neurosync. The vote was unanimous. Later, in the quiet of my office, no longer glass-walled, a change I had insisted on to reduce the fishbowl feeling for all employees, Thomas and I shared a moment of reflection. I keep thinking about that clause in the shareholders' agreement, I admitted, the one that saved everything, if you hadn't insisted on it all those years ago. I'd like to claim brilliant foresight, Thomas chuckled, but honestly it was just respect for your contribution. I never imagined it would protect the company from my own son. The irony is that Jackson taught us all something valuable, I said. About the importance of legal safeguards, yes, but more fundamentally about protecting what you build. Technical brilliance without business protection is vulnerable. Business ambition without technical integrity is hollow. Thomas nodded. That's the real lesson in all of this. True leadership isn't just about vision or execution in isolation. It's about bringing both together with integrity. 1 year had transformed not just the company but me as well. The technical expert who had been content to work in the background while others handled business matters had discovered capabilities I never knew I possessed. By combining my deep technical understanding with newly developed business acumen, I had helped create something stronger than what had existed before. You know what still amazes me? I told Thomas. That email. So public, so calculated to humiliate. Jackson never imagined it would become the first domino in his downfall. Pride before the fall, Thomas said quietly. He underestimated you, the board, and the culture we built. That was his fundamental mistake. As we look to the future, Neurosync stands as a testament to resilience, to the power of founding principles, and to the unexpected journeys that shape both companies and the people who build them. What began with a shocking termination email led to something none of us could have predicted. A stronger company with leadership that truly understands both its technical heart and its business potential. The lesson I carry forward is simple, but profound. Protect what you build, not just with legal clauses, but with unwavering commitment to your values. Technical knowledge, combined with business acumen, creates leadership that can weather any storm, and sometimes the very crisis that threatens to destroy everything becomes the catalyst for building something even better. Have you ever faced a situation where you were underestimated or pushed aside, only to find strength you didn't know you had? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Like this video if you've ever had to stand up for yourself in a professional setting, subscribe for more stories of resilience and triumph, and share with anyone who might need a reminder that sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our most meaningful growth. Thank you for listening, and remember, the clauses you insist on today might be the protection you need tomorrow.